years, both professionally and privately. Firstly, I will briefly inform you about who the Kalmyks are, how their migrations unfolded, why and how they arrived in Serbia and Belgrade, where they built their Buddhist temple, thereby establishing the capital of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia as a multicultural, multi-ethnic and multi-religious environment during the period between the two world wars. The Kalmyks are the only Mongolian ethnic group of Buddhist religion living in Europe. The ancestors of the Kalmyks belong to the Oirat group of Mongolian tribes who migrated from Western Mongolia to Eastern Europe several times, and the last time it was in the 17th century when they formated the Kalmyk Khan. As nomadic tribes, they roamed the dry steppe area west of the lower Volga River. A basin on the northwest shore of the Caspian Sea was the most suitable land for nomadic perchers, where they lived in transportable rounded beds called yurts. And we see some of the yurts here on this photo. Over the time, the Kalmyks gradually created fixed settlements with houses and temples, and in 1865, Elista, now capital of the Republic of Kalmykia and part of the Russian Federation also, was founded. And you can see some on these photos, you can see some photos of Elista in the present time. Until the October Revolution of 1917, during which the majority of Kalmyks, as part of horsemen units, sided with the white movement to preserve their lifestyle and proud tradition, they lived peacefully on that territory. And after the collapse of the white movement, by October 1920, over 150,000 White Army soldiers and their families were forced to evacuate to Constantinopolis, nowadays Istanbul, Turkey, and some Greek islands. Huge number of supporters of White movement emigrated to the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, and amongst them were hundreds of Kalmyks. More precisely, from spring 1920 to late 1923, about 500 Kalmyks entered Serbia, and 400 of them settled in Belgrade, thus creating the largest Kalmyk colony in Europe. They settled on the outskirts of Belgrade, but the majority of them settled in Mali Mokri Luk, which was a suburban village of Belgrade at the time. Many Kalmyks worked in tailories and the construction sites, and their hard work was especially evident during the construction of the first skyscraper in Belgrade, called the Albania Palace, odnosno Palata Albanija. They also worked on the construction of Belgrade bridges, especially in the chambers that were used to descend to the bottom of the river to install pillars. They felt great attachment to horses and treated them especially well, and the main goal of the men of the household was to eventually be able to buy a horse. Then they would also buy 2 wheelbarrows or carts to be able to transport bricks and sand, ice for bars, and so on. Kalmyks were excellent coachmen, employed in many Belgrade stables, including the royal one. Also, several of them were jockeys at the racetrack. Perhaps the best known and popular Kalmyk in Yugoslavia was Učuk Kurdinov. He was a football player of the Football Club Yugoslavia, and he is one of the few who remained in Serbia after the Second World War, where he continued to play football in the club Proletar from Zrenjanin, and eventually settled in the town of Senta, where, when he later passed on, was buried. The Belgrade Buddhist temple, they call it Huril or Pagoda, is considered one of the earliest Buddhist temples in Europe, probably only second specifically built for this purpose in the pagoda style, after the one in St. Petersburg. In 1928, Kalmyks were granted permission to build a temple given to them by both the political authorities and the Serbian Orthodox Church. The biggest benefactor of the Belgrade Kalmyks was the industrialist Miloš Ječimović, from whom many of them worked. He not only donated the building materials, bricks and roof tiles, but also gave them the land for free to build their temple on. King Alexander I of Yugoslavia also helped them financially. The temple was completed and solemnly consecrated in 1929 and soon became an attraction, even being listed in the tourist guides. Also, the street in which it was built was officially named the Buddhist Street. City government became a financial supporter of the temple, so it was reconstructed and expanded in 1935 based on the plan that is being preserved and stored in one of the collections of the historical archives of Belgrade. You can see that plan in this slide. They had also Buddhist religious school in the temple, as well as classes of the Kalmyk languages. Due to their appearance, the local population colloquially called them Chinese, but not in a pejorative sense. On the contrary, the Kalmyks got along well with their neighbors, being kind and gentle in their interactions. Kalmyk and Serbian children went to school together, but they also played together very often in the courtyard of the Buddhist temple. During the Second World War and the occupation of Serbia, as there were less and less job opportunities for the Kalmyks, resulting in them having trouble earning money in order to support their families, many of them moved to the Banat village of Debeljača, which is located in Vojvodina, a region of Serbia. They remained in Serbia until 1944, when, fearing retribution from the advancing Grand Army, they withdrew through Slovenia and Austria to Germany. They found temporary shelter in refugee camps in the vicinity of Munich. During this horrendous journey, which they often traveled on foot, they were forced to leave behind their personal belongings and the inventory of the Buddhist temple in Belgrade, which they had taken with them into exile. These items were deposited in the clockrooms of railway stations along the way with the intention of retrieving them later. However, this opportunity never arose, resulting in the loss of nearly the entire temple inventory as well as documents and photos. In Germany, the Kalmyk refugees remained until the winter of 1951-52, when under the patronage of American voluntary organizations, they resettled in the United States, primarily in the states of Pennsylvania and New Jersey, where their descendants still live today. And now we are coming to the sources, historical sources and literature. The Kalmyks and their temple that was damaged and destroyed during the Second World War were almost completely forgotten after the Second World War until 1998, when the study Kalmyks in Serbia 1920 to 1944 was published. Since the author of this publication is my late father, Toma Milenković, a historian and writer of several monographs on Russian immigration in Serbia, I witnessed how research based on a limited numbers of newspaper articles, fragmentary and isolated archival materials from various Serbian archives, mostly historical archives of Belgrade, as well as from the National Archive of the Republic of Kalmykia and the Library of the Kalmyk Institute of Humanities and Applied Science in Arista, also with the data from the libraries in Moscow and Prague, can result in a scholarly monography, the most comprehensive publication on this community published in Serbia to date. After this publication was printed, several works about Kalmyks in Serbia appeared, including the novel Kaya, Belgrade and the Good American by Mirjana Đurđević in 2009, and the commentary There Were Kalmyks in Belgrade Once by Boško Milosavljević in 2012. However, in the 2010s, newspapers began to occasionally print articles of Kalmyks, bringing more and more of their history and stories to modern readers and usually referring to the temple as the Belgrade Pagoda. And now we come to the nowadays, thanks to the internet connections and social media, communication is much simpler. And here, first and foremost, I must mention the Kalmyk Road Facebook group, founded and run by this gentleman, Ben Moshkin, retired IT professional. As a great enthusiast, he collects photos and documents of his compatriots and posts them on his Facebook group. With his knowledge, he tries to improve the quality of the family old photos and also colors them. Also, in group photos, he marks people with numbers so that members of the Kalmyk community can write the names of their relatives and acquaintances if they recognize them. In this way, they preserve the memory of their ancestors and tell their history to the younger generations. Thanks to his selfless effort, I was able to put together this presentation because most of the photos used were just borrowed from the Kalmyk Road Facebook group. It also helps, the Facebook group helps in connecting with people from different countries, even continents. Thanks to the Kalmyk Group Road, I got in touch with Sanja Vučkajeva-Vidanovska, a writer from Bitola in North Macedonia. Her background is interesting since she comes from a mixed marriage on her father's side, namely her grandmother Zora Savic married Toža Vučkajev in the early 1930s and had 2 children with him, a son and a daughter. Such marriages were not common, but they arose as a consequence of the fact that among the Kalmyk community there was a big discrepancy in the gender ratio of the immigrants, 1 woman to 5 men. So their number in Belgrade never grew over 500. As a result of the cordial relations the 2 communities had, there were some Kalmyk Serbian marriages where Kalmyk men would marry Serbian women. My first meeting with Sanja was more than touching. We had the impression that we had known each other forever, and I learned from her that her grandmother remembered her late husband as a very hardworking and honest man who was extremely devoted to his family and was a very caring father. Also, thanks to the social media, I'm on a virtual connection with Yaman Evirko, whose father, Kliji Ulanov, was one of the few university-educated Kalmyks in Serbia. He graduated in medicine from the University of Belgrade and served as a doctor in many towns outside of the capital, where he always attracted the attention of the population because of his appearance. In addition, Facebook enabled me to be in contact with Kalmyks from the Republic of Kalmykia, among whom is the young journalist Sava Kuchalov, who writes about his compatriots who live outside their home country. He also gives guest lectures at the university, participates in television programs, and also works to publish as many projects on the Kalmyks translated into Russian and as possible. Last but not least, many descendants of the Belgrade Kalmyks, thanks to the financial stability they gained by living and working in the USA, come to visit Belgrade. And last year, I had a great pleasure of meeting Alta and Ljubi Borushkin, whose parents were born in Belgrade, and showing them around, introducing them to traditional Serbian dishes, and taking them to the site of the Kalmyk Buddhist temple. Unfortunately, I was not proud of the scene shown because there is a ruined building in its place and not even a single memorial board mentions that the pagoda once stood on that place. Even so, they were very grateful to be able to be in this sacred place for them, from where they took a few stones to put on their home altar and to walk through the streets where their ancestors walked. Also, the meeting with them was very touching, and they are so humble, grateful for the opportunity to be there. And finally, I will end this by stating that despite the oblivion, Kalmyks left a big mark in modern Belgrade's etymology, one of the largest modern neighborhoods, Konjarnik, meaning horse breeding area, which fully developed from the 1960s, is named after the horses Kalmyks used to keep in this area before the Second World War. And that is all. Thank you for your attention.